Hello HEMA friends and welcome to this new video. So today I am going to review the Malleus Martialis Liutger, which you are watching right here in my hands, which as you can see is a Type 14, Oxshot Type 14 of course, one-handed sword, medieval one-handed sword or arming sword as we generally call it. Now the most interesting feature of this sword is that it is a sporty version of a Type 14. So it is extremely flexible, as you can see, on a very short blade, which is something which is not, as you can imagine, really easy to obtain. So the shorter is a blade, the harder it is to make it safe and flexible enough to have, let's say, good sparring qualities, so safety qualities. Now instead, this one-handed sword, this Type 14, is extremely flexible. Not as flexible to, let's say, create problems in your binding practice or whatever. If you are a bind enthusiast, it is not a problem. So it is as stiff, it is stiff enough to bind and play in the bind, and it is extremely safe in terms of sparring. So the most important feature of this sword is safety. So talking about the aesthetic of this sword, I would say that is really good. It is keeping the, let's say, the average, I would say the ideal shape of a Type 14 sword with all these different angles. So as you can see, there is a different angle here, another one here, and then another one in the tip, which is something that you can see in, I would say, every single Type 14 sword. There is also this triple fuller here, which is kind of stylish, and it is, I would say, defining this kind of model, the Liutger one. It is really cool. And probably the blade is the coolest part of this sword. Yeah, it is my favorite part at least. Now I really like also the cross guard, because I say it in every single, I will say, review video. The cross guard is kind of simple, and that's why I like it. So I really like simple cross guards. And it is also, as you can see, rounded, which is a common feature which we can see in Type 14 swords. And this also means that it is, generally speaking, harder to flex on the other side. So if you receive a very strong blow, it means that, generally speaking, it is, let's say, it is harder to bend it. So, very good blade. I really like the crossguard. The handle is wrapped in some kind of synthetic wrap. Now this means that, generally speaking, it is grippy, especially with organic gloves. Now when you're using a glove which is more synthetic, it depends from the kind of glove. So sometimes you have a very good grip, other times you have a hard time in gripping your sword. It greatly depends from which kind of sparring viable, so protective glove you are using, because every single protective glove is made in a different way, and also you can grip the sword in different ways with different gloves. So it depends from the glove. I would say that, generally speaking, the shape of the handle is good, and it is kind of grippy, especially with organic gloves. When I'm using it with my sparring gloves, also because I'm using leather gloves under my sparring gloves, so my palm is grippy over the handle, I didn't find harder times in gripping the sword, so it wasn't sliding away most of the times. I had, I would say, let's say 200, I just say a number, but over 200 exchanges, I lost the grip on my sword 2-3 times, which happens especially when you're hitting someone and you, of course, you can just pass the opponent if you're using a blunt sword, and you should use a blunt sword when you are sparring with someone. So on the impact, sometimes it happens that you lose the grip. Now it happens in, I would say, most of the swords, if you are hitting in a, I would say, strong enough way, simply because you bounce away. Okay, so it happens. So generally speaking, I didn't had an hard time compared to other swords which I use generally in terms of grip. The pommel. Now the pommel is kind of simple. It is not, compared to all the other parts of the sword, is okay. It's not like super cool or whatever. On the pommel there is the only thing which I would say critique about the sword, which is the edges of the pommel. So the pommel is a bit edgy. I would like to see something more rounded here, simply because sometimes you can just, I don't say hurt yourself, but the more, of course, the angle of a pommel is edgy, the more there is annoyance when you are fighting or whatever, or you're just using it to show something. And yeah, that's the only thing which I don't really like, but is a minor thing, right? Talking about the overall shape, it is like historical. I mean, it's even a quite common pommel, so disc pommel, and I kind of like the round pommel like this one. So it is perfectly in line with my style, and I generally like it. So only thing which I don't really like is that edge here. Now, as you can see, the pommel is not pinned, but it is screwed. So there is people which don't like screwed sword. I generally prefer pinned one, to be honest. But I don't find this a problem, so I enjoy the sword here as it is. By the way, I just asked for you guys if you want a pinned version of this sword. By now you can't have it. So the sport line is made with this idea as let's say one in some ways is one of the basics, the basis of the sport line, that you have a screwed blade, and if you want you can just change the blade. Or also, which is probably the most interesting feature in this sense, because I mean, changing the blade on a blade like this, maybe it can break, but generally speaking you just change the sword. In fact, I would say that the most important feature about having a screwed blade is that you can clean the tongue. One of the problems that you may have on a sword is that the tongue rusts, and so by having it screwed you can just screw off the pommel, then you can just pull away every single part, you can just clean everything and just mount up everything together. And this is probably the most interesting feature about having a screwed pommel. And yeah, the screw seems okay, so I didn't have problem. I don't know, I will see in the future, but after the sparring which I had, I didn't have any kind of problem. So I will say very good. The blade is resistant enough, so I didn't have major blurs or whatever. It is also, by the way, I forgot to mention, it is tapered. So I mean, you have different blade dimensions on the strong and on the weak. So on the strong, it is the blade is a little bit fatter, so it is a little bit large, and then it becomes thinner the more you go toward the tip. Then there is a little bit of enlarged tip for, of course, safety motivations, which is really cool. Now, talking about handling qualities, I would say that it is a really fast sword. Now, it is fast because it's short, and this is probably the main quality that makes this sword fast. Generally speaking, the shorter a blade is, the faster it is. It is not always the case, because it is also depending from different qualities like balance and the weight distribution, for example, but generally speaking, a short sword is a fast sword. Now, this sword is really fast also because, as you have seen before, the blade tapers toward the tip. So this helps feeling the blade as light, let's say. At the same time, the point of balance is around 9 to 10 centimeters from the crossguard, which makes the blade still feel, let's say, present enough in the bind to, let's say, work out all the binding actions that you want. Also, it is worth mentioning that the handle is long enough to make me able to use the sword with my sparring gloves, which is an extremely important feature in a sparring viable replica like this one. Yeah, so that's the Malleus Martialis Liutger. I really like this sparring replica. I would like to see more sparring replica in the future, not only in arming swords. I would really like to see more long swords, sparring viable replica in longsword fencing or other weapons. So yeah, a really good sword. Well, people, thanks for watching this video. Remember that if you want to support me, you can just drop a sub or a like on this video if you liked it, of course. And if you want to support me even more and receive more of my contents, you can just join my Patreon community, link in the description. Thanks for watching, people, and as always, see you next time.